In the endless silence of deep space, a human hospital ship drifted slowly between the stars. Its large white hull carried the red symbol of healing, a mark that every nation and every species understood. This was not a weapon of war, but a sanctuary for the wounded. Inside, hundreds of injured soldiers lay in beds while doctors and nurses moved from room to room. They carried hope, not guns. The hospital ship was never meant for battle. It was a floating beacon of mercy, a promise that even in war, there were places where life was protected. But space is vast, and mercy is often ignored. The crew worked with calm discipline. Machines hummed softly, heart monitors beeped in steady rhythms, and the low voices of healers filled the hallways. A young nurse adjusted a soldier's bandages, whispering kind words. In another ward, a doctor leaned over a patient, scanning a broken arm with a healing device. For a moment, it almost felt peaceful. The hospital ship had been traveling for weeks, moving far from the front lines, carrying men and women who had barely survived the chaos of war. They believed they were safe now. But danger was closer than anyone knew. At the edge of the system, far beyond the hospital ship scanners, something stirred in the darkness. A fleet of alien warships cut through space like shadows. Their hulls were jagged and sharp, their weapons glowing with energy. They were predators, and they had found prey. They did not see the hospital ship as sacred, nor did they respect the symbol painted on its side. To them, it was human, and that was reason enough to destroy it. Silent and merciless, they formed a line and accelerated toward their target. Inside the hospital ship, alarms suddenly blared. Red lights flashed in every corridor. "Unidentified ships detected," shouted the sensor officer on the bridge. The captain, a weary man who had spent his life saving lives instead of taking them, froze for a single second. Then his voice thundered with command. "Raise shields. Send out a distress call immediately." The crew obeyed, their hands flying across consoles. A signal was sent out into the dark, a desperate cry for help. "This is the hospital vessel Nightingale. We are under attack. I repeat, we are under attack." The patients felt the ship shudder as it tried to maneuver. Nurses rushed to secure equipment, strapping down beds and covering wounded soldiers with protective sheets. Fear spread like fire, but so did determination. They had no weapons to fight with, no army to defend them, only their courage and their hope that someone, somewhere, was listening to their call. Through the bridge windows, the captain saw the alien ships closing in. There were dozens of them, their black hulls cutting across the stars. He felt his heart pound. "All hands, brace for impact," he shouted. A moment later, the first strike came. A beam of energy ripped across the hospital ship's side, tearing open metal and sending sparks flying. Explosions echoed through the hallways. The lights flickered, and screams filled the air. The Nightingale was being torn apart. Fire suppression systems activated, spraying white mist through burning corridors. Doctors dragged patients from collapsing rooms, ignoring their own injuries. A nurse carried a wounded soldier on her back, stumbling through smoke-filled halls. The young man coughed, blood staining his lips, but he whispered, "Don't stop, save the others." She pushed forward, refusing to let him go. The spirit of humanity burned even in the darkest moment. The captain gripped his chair as the ship shook again. "Keep the distress call open," he ordered. His voice was hard, but his eyes carried sorrow. He knew what the aliens were doing. They wanted to kill the helpless. They wanted to break humanity's spirit by striking where it was weakest. But the captain swore to himself that his ship would not fall silently. Even if they were destroyed, their call would reach someone. Humanity would know. And humanity would answer. On the medical deck, a doctor crouched beside a small boy, the child of a refugee who had been rescued during the war. The boy trembled as the walls shook around him. The doctor held his hand and whispered, "Do not be afraid. Help will come. Just hold on." The boy's wide eyes stared at the ceiling, where dust fell like snow with every blast. Outside, alien ships circled like vultures, waiting to finish their prey. The Nightingale fought to stay alive. Its engines roared, pushing it into evasive maneuvers, but it was too slow, too fragile. Another blast rocked the vessel, sending it spinning slightly off course. Consoles sparked, metal cracked, and wounded soldiers cried out as gravity shifted. The distress signal flickered, cutting in and out. "This is Nightingale, attacked, need assistance." Then static swallowed the rest. For a brief moment, silence returned. Smoke drifted through the corridors, broken by the groans of the injured. The crew looked to their captain. The patients looked to their doctors. And the galaxy itself seemed to wait. Somewhere out there, beyond the stars, humanity's answer was rising. But would it arrive in time? The hospital ship's lights flickered once more, and with them, hope itself seemed ready to fade. Far away from the battlefield, on Earth's blue and green surface, life continued under the shield of distance. Cities hummed with the sound of industry, families walked in peace, and children played in the parks, unaware of the horrors unfolding light years away. But inside Earth's military command center, everything changed in an instant. A sharp alarm echoed through the great hall as a technician raised his head in shock. "Incoming transmission," he shouted. Officers turned their heads, their eyes narrowing. The screen flickered, and then a broken, crackling voice filled the room. "This is the hospital vessel Nightingale. We are under attack. Repeat, under attack." Static swallowed the rest, but the message was enough. The command center fell silent, the weight of those words sinking in. The commander, a stern woman named Admiral Reyes, stood tall at the center of the room. Her face was carved by years of battle, but her eyes revealed a storm of emotions. A hospital ship. The one ship that should never be touched. She clenched her jaw, her voice steady but edged with fire. "Play it again." The transmission repeated, the crackling distress call cutting through every heart in the room. Men and women shifted uncomfortably at their stations, their hands tightening on consoles. Everyone understood the meaning. This was no accident, no mistake. It was a deliberate strike against the helpless. Admiral Reyes turned to her officers. "Where is the Nightingale located?" A young lieutenant answered quickly, his voice shaking slightly. "Outer Rim sector, near the Dravos cluster. That's deep space, far from reinforcements." His words hung heavy. The Nightingale was vulnerable, alone, and surrounded. The Admiral's fists closed. She knew that by the time the distress signal reached Earth, hours had already passed. The Nightingale could be gone already. Yet she also knew one thing with certainty. If humanity ignored this attack, they would never again be respected. She walked to the center of the command deck and raised her voice so that everyone could hear. "The enemy has crossed the line. They struck a hospital ship. They targeted our wounded, our doctors, our healers. This is not only an attack on a vessel, it is an attack on humanity itself. We will answer." Her words cut through the silence like steel. Around her, officers straightened in their chairs, their fear replaced by determination. The room began to pulse with energy as orders were given. Fleets were summoned, battle groups were prepared, and the engines of war began to roar. In the hangars of Mars, massive warships powered up, their hulls gleaming under the harsh lights. On Earth's lunar stations, soldiers ran to their posts, their boots echoing on metal floors. Entire flotillas were being awakened from rest. Humanity's vengeance was gathering speed. Pilots strapped themselves into fighters, engineers fueled the cruisers, and commanders checked weapon systems. A sense of purpose filled the air. This was not a war of territory or politics. This was justice. Admiral Reyes stared at the holographic display of the galaxy, her eyes locked on the distant mark where the Nightingale had sent its final cry. She knew she could not reach them in time to prevent the first attack. But she also knew the aliens had made a mistake. In their arrogance, they believed humanity would accept this crime. They thought fear would silence Earth. But Earth was not silent. Earth was rising. "Mobilize the 7th Fleet," she commanded. "Send word to the colonies. I want every ship capable of battle moving toward the Dravos cluster. Make it clear, our orders are not defense. Our orders are vengeance." The officers saluted, their voices united as they echoed, "Yes, Admiral." Meanwhile, news of the attack spread beyond the command center. In the streets of Earth cities, in the mines of Mars, in the domes of Europa, whispers grew into anger. People saw the message replayed on screens, the crackling cry of the hospital ship begging for help. Fathers clenched their fists. Mothers held their children closer. Veterans who had fought on distant worlds felt rage burn again in their hearts. The message was simple. If humanity did not act now, then no hospital ship, no sanctuary, would ever be safe again. On one carrier preparing to launch, a young soldier sat in silence, staring at his rifle. His brother had been aboard the Nightingale, sent there after being wounded in the last battle. The soldier's hands trembled, but not from fear. His voice was quiet, but filled with iron. "They will pay. For every innocent life, they will pay." Around him, other soldiers nodded, their faces grim but resolute. Across the fleet, that same fire was burning. The 7th Fleet rose into the dark. Ship after ship broke free from orbit, engines blazing as they formed a massive wall of steel and light. At the front stood the flagship, a colossal battleship named Retribution. Its cannons glowed faintly, waiting for the command to unleash their fury. As the fleet aligned, Admiral Reyes spoke once more, her words broadcast to every soldier, every ship, every ear. "They thought mercy made us weak. They thought compassion was a weapon they could turn against us. But today, they will learn the truth. We may heal. We may protect. But when you strike at our mercy, you awaken our wrath. And our wrath is endless." The fleet surged forward, engines tearing across space, leaving Earth far behind. The stars stretched into lines as hyperspace swallowed them, carrying humanity's vengeance toward the battlefield. Back on Earth, people watched the sky, knowing their defenders had gone to deliver justice. And across the galaxy, whispers of the Nightingale's call began to spread. Some felt pity. Some felt fear. But all would soon learn that humanity's answer had already begun. The Nightingale drifted in darkness, its once bright hull torn by fire and smoke. The proud hospital ship, designed for mercy and healing, was now broken, bleeding light into the void. Sections of the vessel were in flames, atmosphere leaking into space, alarms screaming in every corridor. But inside, amid the destruction, life clung desperately to hope. Doctors and nurses ran through smoke-filled halls, pulling patients out of collapsing rooms, fighting against fear and exhaustion. They were healers, not warriors, yet in this moment, they were the only shield the wounded had left. The captain sat firmly in his chair on the bridge, blood on his forehead from a falling console. His eyes burned with determination. He knew the alien fleet could finish them at any moment, but still he commanded, his voice steady. "Keep systems running. Keep the signal alive. As long as we breathe, humanity will know what happened here." His crew nodded, some with tears in their eyes, but none disobeyed. Every second of survival meant the chance their message might reach someone, anyone. In the lower medical decks, chaos raged. Nurses strapped patients to beds, securing them against the violent shakes of the ship. A young doctor named Elara ran from room to room, her white coat blackened with soot. She tried to keep her voice calm as she reassured the injured. "Stay with me. Hold on. Help will come." A soldier, his leg shattered, grabbed her wrist and whispered, "Don't waste your breath on me. Save the others." But Elara shook her head fiercely. "Everyone matters. You matter. No one gets left behind." Her words gave the wounded strength, even as explosions rocked the hull above. The aliens did not stop. Their ships circled like wolves, firing in bursts, testing the Nightingale's strength. They could have destroyed it in one decisive strike, but instead they seemed to enjoy watching it suffer, breaking it apart piece by piece. On the bridge, the captain understood their cruelty. "They want us to beg. They want us to despair," he muttered. His hands tightened on the chair's arms. "But we will not give them the pleasure." Deep in the engineering bay, sparks rained as a handful of crew members worked desperately to keep power flowing. Every blast knocked out another system, but still they fought. One engineer, her face streaked with grease, slammed her fist against a console to force a connection. "If we lose life support, everyone dies," she shouted over the noise. Her partner adjusted wires with shaking hands. "We can't hold forever." "We don't need forever," she snapped back. "We just need long enough." Above, in the medical ward, a nurse shielded a young refugee child with her own body as debris rained down. The boy cried, covering his ears, and she whispered softly to him, "Close your eyes. Think of home. Think of the sun on your face. You'll see it again." Her words steadied him, though her own tears slipped silently down her cheeks. Even in the face of death, humanity gave comfort. The Nightingale's hull groaned under another hit. A massive explosion tore through the side, sending air and fire rushing into space. Emergency bulkheads sealed, trapping some inside damaged sections. Through the small window of a sealed door, survivors pressed their hands against the glass, eyes wide with fear. On the other side, crew members returned the gesture, powerless to save them. The hospital ship was bleeding lives with every passing minute. But even in despair, resistance flickered. A group of wounded soldiers, barely able to walk, insisted on helping. They pushed stretchers, carried oxygen tanks, and supported the medical staff. "We may be broken," one of them grunted, "but we're still human. We don't give up." Their courage spread, lifting the spirits of those around them. Even the dying refused to let go of hope. The captain's voice echoed through the ship's speakers, calm but firm. "This is the Nightingale. We are still alive. We are still fighting. Hold on." His words carried into every dark corner, every trembling heart. And though the aliens continued their assault, those words planted steel in the souls of his people. They were not victims. They were survivors. Still, time was running out. The distress signal had grown weaker, the antenna damaged. On the bridge, a communications officer cried out, "Signal failing, sir. We'll lose it any second." The captain closed his eyes briefly, whispering a silent prayer. "Then send one last burst. Make sure they hear us." The officer did as ordered, sending the broken, desperate call into the void one final time. Somewhere, far across the stars, humanity might still be listening. The Nightingale's lights flickered again, entire decks going dark. Fires burned unchecked. Patients coughed in the smoke. The walls trembled with every blast. Yet even now, the crew refused to abandon their duty. Doctors continued to treat the wounded, even as blood stained their hands. Nurses whispered words of hope, even as tears filled their eyes. Engineers held power lines together with their bare hands, burning themselves to keep the lights on. In the center of the chaos, one thought united them all: they must endure. They must survive, if only a little longer. Because help was coming. It had to come. Somewhere beyond the darkness, humanity's fleets were already moving. Somewhere, vengeance was being prepared. The survivors of the Nightingale clung to that belief like a flame in the cold void. The aliens thought they had broken them, but they were wrong. The Nightingale was still alive, and as long as one soul aboard still breathed, the ship would fight to endure. And so the survivors struggled on, minute by minute, heartbeat by heartbeat, refusing to surrender to despair. Their cries, their courage, their suffering, all of it would be answered. The galaxy had not yet seen the fury of humanity. And soon, very soon, that fury would arrive. Across the stars, the call of the Nightingale had reached its mark. On Earth, the command centers blazed with activity. On Mars and the colonies, alarms echoed through steel corridors. Humanity had heard the cry, and humanity had chosen its answer. No more silence. No more mercy for the merciless. From every dock and every station, warships began to rise. The Seventh Fleet, Earth's most powerful arm of vengeance, awakened like a sleeping giant. In the great hangars of Mars, titanic battleships rumbled as engines came alive, shaking the ground with their power. Crews rushed aboard, their boots pounding metal floors, their voices tight with determination. Fighters lined the decks, pilots strapping into cockpits, faces grim and focused. Mechanics shouted over the roar of reactors, locking weapons into place and sealing heavy armor plates. Every person knew what this mission meant. They were not simply leaving for battle. They were leaving to deliver justice for the innocent. On Earth's moon, launch bays opened like great jaws, releasing destroyers into the void. Their engines lit up one by one, shining against the darkness. Each ship carried soldiers, men and women who had seen war before, but none of them had ever carried such fire in their hearts. They were not fighting for conquest or territory. They were fighting for the nightingale, for the doctors, for the wounded who had been struck when they could not defend themselves. And in their hearts, they carried fury. Admiral Reyes stood on the command deck of the flagship Retribution, her gaze locked on the stars ahead. She had commanded fleets before, but never one with such unity of purpose. Every ship, every soldier, every weapon was focused on one goal: revenge. Her voice carried across the fleet, transmitted into every vessel. Soldiers of humanity, today we rise not only as warriors but as guardians of our honor. The enemy thought we would bow when they struck the helpless. They believed our compassion was weakness. But they are about to learn the truth. We will not be broken. We will not forgive. And we will never forget. Her words echoed through the speakers, sparking fire in the hearts of all who heard them. The fleet prepared for launch. One by one, ships activated hyperspace drives, their cores glowing bright as stars. The Retribution led the line, a colossal ship armed with weapons capable of tearing apart an entire fleet. Beside it, cruisers and destroyers formed a protective wall, while carriers released squadrons of fighters that swarmed like steel bees. The Seventh Fleet was ready. Humanity's answer was ready. On the smaller ships, soldiers sat in silence, preparing themselves for the storm to come. Some clutched pictures of family, whispering promises to return. Others tightened their fists around weapons, whispering vows of vengeance. One young pilot, his brother aboard the Nightingale, closed his eyes and whispered, "Hold on, brother. Just hold on. I'm coming." Across the fleet, thousands whispered similar prayers, all pointing toward the same destiny. The engines roared. The stars outside the windows blurred into streaks of light as hyperspace swallowed them. The Seventh Fleet leapt forward, tearing across the galaxy at impossible speed. For those on board, time seemed to stretch, the silence heavy with anticipation. Every heartbeat brought them closer to the Dravos cluster, closer to the Nightingale, closer to the enemy that had dared to touch the untouchable. Admiral Reyes walked slowly through the halls of her flagship, her presence steadying those around her. Soldiers stood straighter as she passed, officers nodded firmly. She paused at a viewing deck, watching the stars twist and whirl outside. Her thoughts were sharp, her resolve unshakable. She had seen battles lost and won, had buried comrades and endured grief. But this mission was different. This mission was not just about victory. It was about sending a message to every species in the galaxy. Humanity protects its own. On Mars, families watched the fleet's departure on giant screens, cheering through tears. They knew many of their sons and daughters would not return. But they also knew this fight was necessary. Across the colonies, messages of support flooded in, words of encouragement sent to the soldiers racing into battle. Humanity was united in one voice, one purpose. The aliens had struck at their heart, and now their heart had become a weapon. Inside the Retribution's war room, holographic maps displayed the enemy's last known position. Officers spoke in clipped tones, tracking the alien fleet's movements. Estimated strength, 25 warships, including one heavy flagship, a strategist reported. Admiral Reyes studied the image with cold eyes. And the Nightingale? The room fell silent for a moment before another officer answered. Still transmitting faint signals, but the ship is heavily damaged. Survivors are holding on. The Admiral's jaw tightened. Then we will hold nothing back. For every second they survived, we will make the enemy bleed 10 times more. The fleet surged onward. In the darkness of hyperspace, humanity's vengeance grew like a storm, waiting to be unleashed. Every soldier aboard knew the risk, knew that many would not live to see another sunrise. But none of them faltered. They were united by rage, by honor, by the cry of the nightingale echoing in their ears. The cry of the helpless had awakened a fury that nothing in the galaxy could silence. And when the Seventh Fleet finally emerged from hyperspace, the galaxy itself would tremble. The nightingale drifted half-dead, its lights flickering weakly in the dark. The alien fleet circled it like hunters, firing short bursts to break its defenses little by little. The hospital ship trembled under each strike, but somehow it still clung to life. Inside, survivors prayed that their signal had reached someone, that Earth had heard their cries. And then, without warning, space itself seemed to tear apart. A ripple of light split the blackness, growing brighter and brighter, until massive shadows poured through. The Seventh Fleet had arrived. The first human ships erupted from hyperspace in a blaze of blue fire. Their engines burned like suns, their hulls gleaming with steel and fury. Dozens of warships appeared in formation, spreading across the battlefield with precision. At the center of them all was the flagship Retribution, its colossal guns already glowing with deadly energy. Behind it, carriers released waves of fighters that streaked forward like angry sparks. For a heartbeat, the galaxy seemed to pause. The predators circling the hospital ship froze, their prey forgotten, their attention pulled to the new threat. Humanity had come. On the bridge of the Retribution, Admiral Reyes stood tall, her face calm but her eyes blazing. Target the nearest alien cruisers. Full firepower. Protect the Nightingale at all costs. Her words carried through every ship, and the fleet obeyed. A moment later, the darkness of space exploded with light. Human battleships unleashed their first volley, a storm of missiles and plasma fire tearing into the alien ranks. The first enemy cruiser shattered under the assault, its hull breaking apart as fire consumed it. The aliens had expected no resistance, but now they faced the wrath of an entire fleet. The alien ships scrambled to respond, their weapons spitting red beams of energy. Explosions rippled across the human formation as shields flared under the impacts. One destroyer was struck hard, its hull cracking, but the line held firm. The humans pressed forward, ships moving in tight formation, their fire coordinated and relentless. Fighter squadrons darted through the chaos, weaving between massive vessels, unleashing torpedoes into alien engines. Dozens of smaller alien ships went up in flames, scattering debris across the battlefield. On the Nightingale, survivors watched in awe as the human fleet spread around them like a protective wall. For the first time since the attack began, hope returned to their eyes. Doctors and wounded soldiers pressed against windows, cheering as human warships intercepted incoming fire meant for them. A young nurse whispered, her voice trembling, "They came. They really came." The patients weakly raised their hands in salute, their strength renewed by the sight of salvation. But the battle was far from over. The alien flagship, a massive dark vessel twice the size of the Retribution, moved forward at last. Its weapons lit up like burning suns, and a devastating beam shot out, cutting through a human cruiser in one terrible strike. The ship split apart, its pieces spinning into the void. On the Retribution's bridge, Admiral Reyes' expression hardened. "Focus fire on their flagship," she ordered. "Break their spine." The human fleet shifted as one, their guns turning toward the massive alien vessel. Dozens of warships fired at once, unleashing everything they had. Explosions rippled across the alien hull, tearing through armor and shields, but still it pressed on, roaring with power. The aliens returned fire, and the void lit up with destruction as ship after ship was torn apart on both sides. It was a battle of giants, and the Nightingale lay in the middle of it, fragile and silent, its life hanging on the outcome. A squadron of alien raiders broke away from the main fight, heading straight for the hospital ship. Inside, alarms blared again. Survivors screamed, believing the end had come. But before the raiders could strike, human fighters intercepted them. The sky became a dance of light and death as small ships clashed in close combat. Human pilots fought with unmatched fury, remembering the cries of the Nightingale. One pilot shouted into his comms, "For the wounded! For the fallen!" as he dove straight into the enemy formation, missiles trailing behind him. Alien raiders exploded one by one, their wrecks spinning away harmlessly. The hospital ship lived another moment. The Retribution's guns charged again, its massive cannon glowing brighter and brighter. Admiral Reyes gripped the railing, her voice steady. Fire! The ship unleashed its main weapon, a colossal beam of white energy that tore across the battlefield. It struck the alien flagship with crushing force, ripping through shields and slamming into its core. The alien ship shook violently, explosions blooming along its hull, but still it did not fall. The enemy was powerful, relentless, and determined to break humanity's spirit. The battle raged on, neither side willing to give ground. Space was filled with burning wrecks and drifting debris, but still the fleets fought, their weapons turning the void into a storm of light. The Nightingale floated at the heart of it all, protected but fragile, its crew watching with wide eyes as humanity and the aliens clashed in fire and fury. And though the outcome was still uncertain, one thing was clear: humanity would not retreat. They would not abandon their own. Admiral Reyes' voice cut through the chaos, broadcast to every soldier. They thought they could slaughter our wounded without consequence. They thought wrong. Today, we show the galaxy that when humanity is wounded, humanity fights back harder than anyone else. Today, they will remember our fury. Her words echoed across the fleet, filling every heart with unbreakable resolve. The battle roared on, brighter and fiercer, as the clash reached its peak. And somewhere deep inside the wrecked Nightingale, the survivors whispered in unison, their voices rising above fear. "Hold on, help is here." The battle raged like a storm across the stars. Human and alien warships clashed in waves of fire, their weapons lighting the void with explosions that shook the heavens. The Nightingale lay at the heart of the chaos, scarred and broken, but alive. The Seventh Fleet surrounded it like a shield of steel, holding the line against the enemy. Dozens of alien cruisers pressed forward, their weapons burning, determined to finish what they had started. Humanity answered with equal fury, matching every strike with fire of their own. The clash had reached its peak, but now the moment was coming when one side would break. On the bridge of the Retribution, Admiral Reyes stood unshaken as reports poured in. Shields holding at 70%. Enemy cruiser destroyed. We've lost the destroyer Valor. The voices of her officers came sharp and fast, but her focus never wavered. Her eyes were locked on the enemy flagship, the massive vessel that still loomed like a dark shadow across the field. That ship was the heart of the alien fleet, and until it fell, the enemy's will would not break. She knew the battle would turn on one decisive blow. "Form a wall around the Nightingale," Reyes commanded. "Push the enemy back. Do not let them touch that ship." Her words rippled across the fleet, and the human warships obeyed. They moved as one, closing ranks to shield the hospital vessel, turning their guns outward. The aliens unleashed furious fire, but humanity's wall of steel held strong. Blazing energy beams struck the hulls of the battleships, but they refused to fall back. For every human ship destroyed, 2 alien vessels burned in reply. In the medical ward of the Nightingale, survivors felt the battle raging around them. The deck shook with every impact, the lights flickering on and off. Nurses shielded patients from falling debris, doctors worked with trembling hands to keep the wounded alive. Yet amid the chaos, they felt something new: hope. For the first time since the attack began, they believed they might survive. Through the windows they saw human warships blazing in defense of their broken vessel, and their fear gave way to awe. But the aliens were not finished. The enemy flagship advanced, its colossal guns glowing with power. A single blast tore through space and struck a human cruiser, cutting it apart in seconds. The wreckage drifted silently, a graveyard in the void. On the bridge of the Retribution, the crew watched grimly. Reyes did not flinch. "Focus all fire on their flagship," she ordered. "Bring it down." The human fleet responded instantly. Cannons roared, missiles streaked forward, and plasma fire slammed into the alien vessel. Explosions tore across its hull, ripping through armor and blasting open massive wounds. But still it pushed on, weapons blazing. The aliens fought with desperation, unwilling to surrender. Another beam shot out, striking a human destroyer, tearing its side open. Dozens of soldiers were lost in an instant. The battle was balanced on the edge of a knife. Then the Retribution made its move. Its main cannon began to charge, the core glowing with blinding white light. The ship vibrated as energy built, the weapon preparing to unleash a strike powerful enough to shatter a world. Admiral Reyes gripped the railing, her voice low but filled with fire. For the Nightingale. For every innocent they killed. Fire. The Retribution's cannon unleashed its wrath. A beam of white energy tore across the battlefield, cutting through enemy ships in its path. It struck the alien flagship head-on, ripping through its shields and slamming into its core. The entire vessel shook violently as fire erupted along its surface. Explosions bloomed one after another, tearing open massive breaches. For a moment, the flagship tried to return fire, but then its weapons fell silent. The beam had struck true. The alien flagship began to collapse, its massive frame breaking apart under the weight of its wounds. Fire consumed its decks, sections of the ship tearing away and spinning into space. A final explosion erupted from deep inside its engines, and then the giant vessel was no more. The flagship disintegrated into a storm of fire and debris, scattering across the stars. Silence fell for a heartbeat as both sides watched the fall of the alien leader. The human fleet erupted with renewed fury. Soldiers cheered, pilots roared into their comms, and ships pressed forward with unstoppable momentum. The aliens, stunned by the loss of their flagship, faltered. Their lines broke, their fire weakened, and one by one their ships began to fall. Humanity had seized the turning point, and now the tide of battle shifted in their favor. On the Nightingale, survivors watched the alien flagship burn, their eyes wide with wonder. Some wept openly, clutching one another in relief. Others raised weak fists in triumph. A doctor whispered to her patients, "They did it. They turned the tide. We are not alone." The hospital ship had endured long enough, and now salvation was real. Admiral Reyes' voice echoed across the fleet. "The enemy has lost their heart. Do not let them escape. Show them the cost of their cruelty." Human warships surged forward like a wave, tearing through what remained of the alien forces. The void was filled with fire and wreckage as the invaders were driven back. The predators who had once circled the helpless now became the hunted. The battle was not over, but the momentum had shifted. The Seventh Fleet stood unbroken, their fury unleashed, their honor defended. The Nightingale floated within their protection, scarred but alive. And as the alien fleet began to crumble, one truth became clear to every survivor: humanity's vengeance was unstoppable. The turning point had come, and from this moment on, the galaxy itself would remember the price of striking at humanity's mercy. The battlefield drifted in silence, filled with wreckage and fire. Alien ships burned as their broken remains spun into the void, their once proud fleet reduced to shattered fragments. Human warships stood battered but unyielding, their hulls scarred by fire yet their spirits unbroken. The Nightingale still floated at the center of it all, its lights flickering but alive, shielded by the heroes who had come to its rescue. For the survivors inside, the nightmare was ending. They had lived through hell, and they had seen humanity rise in vengeance. The Seventh Fleet had not only saved them but also carved a warning into the stars. On the bridge of the Retribution, Admiral Reyes watched the battlefield with cold eyes. The enemy was broken, but she knew it was not enough to simply win. The galaxy had been watching, listening, wondering if humanity would bend under cruelty. This was the moment to answer that question, not with silence but with fire. She turned to her communications officer. "Open a channel. Broadcast to all frequencies. If they wanted a message, let us give it to them." The officer's fingers moved swiftly, and soon her words were carried across the void, reaching every corner of the system, even the ears of the defeated aliens. Her voice rang steady and fierce. "This is Admiral Reyes of the United Earth Seventh Fleet. Tonight, you saw the price of attacking the innocent. You thought you could strike our wounded, our healers, our helpless, without consequence. You thought humanity would bow. But hear this: when you harm one of us, you face all of us. We are not weak. We are not prey. We are humanity, and we will never forgive such crimes." Her words burned like steel, cutting through fear and despair, replacing it with pride and fire in every human heart that heard her. Across the Nightingale, survivors listened to the broadcast with tears in their eyes. Nurses clutched patients' hands, wounded soldiers straightened weakly in their beds, and doctors stood taller than before. The message was not only for the enemy but for them. It told them their suffering had not been ignored, that Earth had not abandoned them. They whispered the words with trembling voices, "We are not prey." In that moment, the broken hospital ship became more than a vessel. It became a symbol of endurance. But the broadcast did not end there. Reyes continued, her voice carrying the weight of humanity's fury. To every star that hears this message, let it be known, Earth does not seek war. But if you come for our children, our healers, our wounded, then we will rise as one. We will bring fire to your skies. We will turn your cruelty back upon you. Remember the Nightingale. Remember what happens when you strike at humanity's mercy. This is your only warning. The silence that followed her words was heavier than any explosion. It was a silence filled with fear, awe, and the realization that a new power had spoken. The alien survivors, scattered and broken, listened in silence. Some tried to flee into the dark, their ships limping away. Others sat stunned, their leaders gone, their fleet shattered. They had thought the hospital ship would be an easy prize, a helpless target. Instead, it had become the spark of their greatest defeat. The name Nightingale would haunt them, a scar carved deep into their memory, a reminder of the day humanity's vengeance fell upon them. On board the Retribution, the crew cheered as the alien remnants fled. Pilots shouted in triumph, engineers wept in relief, and soldiers raised their fists in victory. But Admiral Reyes remained calm, her gaze still locked on the burning wrecks. She knew this battle was only the beginning. Humanity had shown its strength, but strength always drew eyes. Other powers would hear of this, some with respect, others with fear, and some with plans of their own. The galaxy would no longer see Earth as quiet or distant. From this day forward, they would see Earth as a force to be reckoned with. The Nightingale was taken under escort, guided safely behind the lines of the 7th Fleet. Its survivors watched as the warships moved with deadly precision, their guns still glowing, their shields still strong. To them, the fleet was more than protection. It was proof that humanity did not forget its own. As the stars stretched endlessly before them, hope returned to hearts that had been broken. The Nightingale had survived, and because of it, a new chapter for humanity had begun. Admiral Reyes gave her final order of the night. Set course back to Earth space. We carry more than survivors, we carry a message. The galaxy must know what happens when they test humanity's resolve. Her officers nodded, their faces solemn. Engines roared to life, and the fleet began its slow turn, leaving behind the burning remains of the enemy. The battlefield faded into the distance, but its memory would burn forever. In the silence of space, the survivors of the Nightingale looked out at the stars. Some whispered prayers of thanks, others simply closed their eyes and let relief wash over them. For them, the future was uncertain, but one truth was clear. They were alive because humanity had risen. The galaxy had seen Earth's fury, and it would not be forgotten. From this day on, the name Nightingale would not mean weakness or helplessness. It would mean defiance, survival, and vengeance. And far away, in the depths of the galaxy, other civilizations listened. Some trembled in fear, others sharpened their weapons, and a few whispered in awe. The humans had declared themselves not prey but predators. And the message was clear: strike at humanity, and you awaken the storm.